while John's just putting that up, can everyone hear me? Is that okay? How many in the room like change? How many people enjoy change? Well, I'll take the first show of hands. It's the 80-20 rule, but it gets broken. It's about 90-10 normally. 10% of people can handle change, about 5% like change, and 90% don't want change. I was at a conference here a week ago in Albury, just up the road here, at an agronomy conference. And I was asked to speak about our operation and how we manage our operation, particularly from a pasture base, obviously being an agronomy conference. Our biggest challenge is change. In whether it's a pasture, whether it's cattle, whether it's industry perception, whether it's our consumer, it's the change that's the hard bit. And I'm sure John's and Steve have probably rattled on about change, and you probably think they've poisoned me with change, but that's the reality. So it's a difficult one. But from our operation, if we didn't embrace change, our operation wouldn't be here today. One thing I have to also comment is that our operation wouldn't be there today if we didn't have the support of the owners. Because I can tell you the beef side of our operation isn't fantastic in any form or way. Our cotton and cropping is fantastic. It's very hard for me at June, budget time, to justify what I do. But the support of the operation, because thank goodness they're avid agriculturalists. They've got large expanse, they've got a big investment in agriculture, and they believe in their mind and their heart that our cattle operation is going to become profitable. Our budget going forward from this June was a very different one to what it was last June, as it was the year before. We have lots of change. That's what I say to my staff when I first put them on. Get used to change, because that's what's going to happen. We're market focused. We start at the market end and work our way backwards. Irrespective of what type of cattle they are, whether we're breeding, whether we're trading, whether we're doing whatever we're doing. And I'll divulge a little bit of change that's happened in the last month that you might understand where we're coming from. So basically, John's just gone through basically the aggregation. I don't want to go on this for too long, but it's pretty important to understand the scale, obviously. Our cotton operation and our cropping operation at Moree, 62,000 acres. There's 25,000 acres irrigation. There's 33,000 acres of dryland cropping and grazing. We've got about 64,000 megs of water entitlements. Our on-farm storage is at 50,000. So in a full potential, we can produce about 150,000 bales of cotton or 140,000 tonne of wheat. What we don't do either of those, we do a combination of both. This year and last year we had full water, as we have for the next 2 years. So we produce about 80,000 bales of cotton and probably about 60,000 tonne of wheat. So that's how we do it, plus around the outskirts we do 10,000 head of cattle around the edge of it. Our aggregation, our cattle aggregation proper, if you like, we've got it's placed in the northern New England, in New England, at Inverell and around or west of Armidale or Uralla, and it's made up of about 76,000 acres of land. Our big expanse has been putting pastures in. We've sown, that figure's changed. We're up to about 50,000 acres of improved sown pasture over the last 8 years. So we're doing on average about anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000 acres of pasture a year. Our natural pastures aren't natural pastures. They're all been fertilised, they've all been aerial seeded, and over time everything's been done to them. So we've got a very productive farms. We purchased Gunny about 18 months ago, and we currently run it at 35,000 head turnover. That's based on domestic and export cattle. We've got a licence to increase that size to about 14 or 18,000, so that'll take us up to about 75,000 turnover. So our total capacity is about 80,000 head on our model as we speak today. We have other interests. We own cotton gin, which is right next to Ketar. We have a hardwood plantation up in the biggest hardwood plantation in Queensland. That's coming up for harvest in about 6 years, I think. And we've got a few planes for flying us about. So the basic principle of our operation is quite simple. We don't. It sounds complex, but it's very simple, and that's the way it's got to be. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So all our cattle purchases come to Sundown Valley, which is so we bring in about 60 odd thousand into Sundown Valley every year. Those cattle go through a series of inductions, which I'll cover off a little bit, and then they get distributed to all the other farms. This model has just changed in the last 2 months. What will happen now, we've got about 55,000 cattle coming in here, and they'll get distributed to Ketar and Gunny. On this side, we've now got direct feed of cattle coming in here from AA Company, which will be Wagyus. So we'll be backgrounding their Wagyu cattle at Paradise and Newstead, and that's come about from a great task of pulling all our economics apart and working out where we are in the cattle industry. How do we get to 80,000 cattle? If you go and purchase 80,000 head of cattle, it puts a fair pressure on the market. It's good for producers in a point, but it's not always good because it has a detrimental effect in the long term because it's not sustainable for us. So we're looking at all different models to get that. We're obviously not staying at 80,000. We want to grow to about 20% a year. So we're looking for about 100,000, 120,000 in a couple of years. So that's our growth that we're looking for. And we've got to look at a new model and how we get to that point. And we've started a new model here. Those farms will be dedicated to Wagyus, backgrounding Wagyus for AA Company. They'll come in and go directly back to Aranui or Gnu, back to their feedlots. So that's helped us obviously we're recognised as the best backgrounders in Australia, and that's recognition for what we're doing there. So, and obviously we've had to negotiate that to get to a point where it's economical for us to do. Time will tell on that one. But our model is very similar. We've been operating at about 60% of our production in the last 2 years. So we've been purchasing up to about 60,000 a year. We're actually going to keep purchasing about 60,000 a year. So the number of purchases is not going to drop. We're increasing our growth here by other cattle coming in. So that'll give us a turnover of about 74,000 this coming 12 months. Simple backgrounding model. This is not the Wagyus, obviously. The Wagyus go at 350 and they come in at 180, so it's a different model altogether, but I'll talk about which is relevant to what we're talking about today. Basically, in weight of about 280, out weight of 420. Average daily gain over the entire year is about 1.2 over the 12 months. So we're looking at about two turns of 140 kilos. So, and we have a stocking rate of about 15 to 20 DSE, and we're producing about 500 to 700 kilos of beef per hectare. The production model at Gunny, we don't induct cattle at Gunny. It's auto-induct. We do that at farm level. 100% of our cattle come via our farm, so we've got a different system altogether that Tony was alluding to. We supply trade cattle to domestic. We do 100-day cattle, and we've done a small amount of 150-day cattle. But basically, they're our two main markets there, 100-day and domestic. What we've been doing, this has changed a little bit, obviously. We were supplying JBS, about 25% of their Beef City operation, and that's obviously changing a lot with our model change. their findings have been mirrored by what we've found at our feedlot. The QA programs that we're running, their cattle sickness and increasing cattle performance in all feedlots, in particular the Beef City and Karuna feedlots. It's a notable difference to how Sundown cattle perform in there versus any other cattle that are in there. We're a big supplier, processing directly to Woolworths. 20% of the kill at Cargill we supply. All the cattle are MSA graded. And obviously, as I said, we sell to a lot of different people. We also are involved in direct marketing of our beef, cotton and grain. We've had a long association with cotton to China and Indonesia. We've been selling directly to them for about 20 years. So we have pretty good contacts in China and Indonesia. The beef is coming online, but that's a hard struggle. I'm sure you got exposed to the MLA graph that went like that in the last year in China. China are always very cautious in how they get to a point. And I think Cameron would have alluded that JBS are very cautious about Chinese, as we are, because you've got to get paid. And that's a big risk in this export market, is getting paid for your beef. It's all well and good to go and market your beef, and you can supply. We can supply any amount of beef to China, no problem. But whether you get paid for it's a different matter. So we can't afford to do that, and we're looking at all different strategies to overcome that. We've got a vertically integrated beef operation. We retain ownership to processing. We're actually furthering that a bit further. We're actually owning further on. Obviously with the China program and a few others, we're looking at ownership right through. One thing in the beef industry, I think you'd all be aware in the room, the chain from producer to processing to retail, someone in the line always makes money. And it seems that one person in that chain always makes money and the other don't. So it's the luck of the draw, or the luck of the cycle. At the moment, the processors are making good money. You look at their 10-year average, terrible. You look at feedlots, they're making a bit of money. Don't be under illusion that feedlots are at processing levels, they're nowhere near it. Our margins in the feedlots are pretty low. At backgrounding level, margins are pretty slim. Producer or weaner producing, I don't have to tell you what that's like. I don't know whether you realise, and I'm not going to ask you the question to put your hand up or not, but there's no beef producers in Australia that are profitable. I'd like someone to dispute me if they really genuinely think they are. We deal with the major banks, and they say they haven't got any people on their books that are profitable in the cattle operation, including ourselves. If we took our whole business, we're profitable, but if we take the cattle operation out, it's not very profitable. So we've got a big challenge ahead of us. I've got a bigger challenge because I've got cotton on my doorstep, and they can't change it to cotton, but we've got to look at other options. We've got a story we sell, and we've been selling to a lot of overseas people, and they've got a real interest in what our story, our paddock to plate story, and it's about stories these days, about how you produce your beef and what you produce and how it is, how it eats, all those sort of things is really important. We engage a lot of professionals, Tony being one, Kev Sullivan being another, John Doyle and Matt George from a nutritional, myself and Nick Jenkins are agronomists. We engage in a lot of research and technology. This is from the beef. In the cotton, we engage in exactly the same process. So we spend a lot of time looking at technology and evaluating technology, investing in technology. So we'll come to a technology that's very basic. Tony's outlined about BRD. It's so simple. BRD is the biggest cost to the industry by a long shot. Don't feel that BRD is only in feedlots. Has anyone had BRD on their farms? We had heaps of it this year. in autumn.
You do in the cold.
Yeah, we do. It depends how they handle, and answering your question about the difference between yard wean cattle going through the sale complex, that has improved the situation tenfold. It's one of the best moves that's been done, particularly from a Victorian base. We applaud the Victorians for getting behind it because it's helped us, and we've been able to source cattle from Victoria now. If you didn't yard wean in Victoria, we couldn't have bought your cattle because the losses are too high. We were buying cattle from Victoria and South Australia unweaned, and we had 4 and 5% losses, and that you can't sustain that. It's just not viable. So since your introduction of yard weaning, I think you're up in your sales. I think you're running at about 80-90% now, which is tremendous. You're starting to do a bit of vaccination work, which is great, and that's helping us too. Unfortunately, looking at southern cattle, we source our southern cattle from December through to March. So what's that worst period for? Is the BRD. So southern cattle always appear to have worse BRD because it's the time of year we buy them. So that's where we can understand that. We understand how it works, so it's not how we perceive it. So why yard wean? Sustainability of the industry. If we don't do this, the industry's not sustainable because it's not going to work. There's no margins. You get losses of 1%. It's costing you about $20 a head. And if your margins are about 80 sub-hundreds, they're $80, that's a significant loss. In our business, that's $500,000 million every time you talk because of the turnover. That's what that means to us. Increased market opportunity and acceptance, particularly in this room. Tony was very clear on the Hereford outlook in the feedlot industry. I can assure you, being a supplier to all the major feedlots, unless they're EU, I can't get Herefords into a lot of the feedlots. We use Herefords in our feedlot because we do the backgrounding program, and we don't see any significant difference between Herefords and other breeds because that's how we do it, and I know you can do it. So there's your opportunity and acceptance into the market. What they'll find, obviously the MLA is doing the work, and it'll be interesting to see what it all comes out, but we can, or you as a group, can actually set your own destiny by taking on some of these basic principles. And yard weaning's the first one. Obviously your reputation of cattle performance for market and future, high survival rate, transporting background and feedlotting as I've covered, better temperament in paddock and pen, and obviously the perception that Tony put up about not using antibiotics, all those sort of things. Yard weaning, I'm sure if people get hold of the unyard weaned cattle, it's not a very pretty setup when you're talking about stress. So when you're actually yard weaning, it comes down to a lot of factors. Attitude of the person, the behaviour of that person, fear of humans by animals. Cattle are fearful of humans, so how they act and their attitude has a lot of effect on how those animals actually react and what stress levels they go through. The productivity and health and welfare is affected by all of the above. So they're the key issues when you're yard weaning. That's a basis to why you're doing it. So when you're in a yard weaning process, it's the ability to cope the ability of the animal to cope declines as stress increases. And as Tony was showing with the BRD, you can see the animal, they go into stress when they're sick, and they just can't cope with the stress. So the stress starts, the production of stress hormones, immunosuppression, which is immune response. So reduced ability to fight disease, and obviously get disease, which is the BRD in most cases. So what you're doing at yard weaning is reducing the stress so they can handle this all the way through. And you wouldn't think by doing 7 days that you could, it has the biggest impact on your cattle. Stress of unweaned cattle. I know of at least 12 stresses that your cattle go through going from weaning through to the sale yard or a new farm or feedlot. And this is best described as a relentless compounding of stress, and it's enough to cripple a fragile developing immune system. So if we get our head around all that, what I'm trying to say to you, in our best scenario, if we could source cattle directly from your farms that were yard weaned and didn't go through a sale yard, we would reduce about 4 stresses in that system. Those 4 stresses would amount to performance and productivity differences at the other end. So how do yard wean? It's very simple. It is so simple. What are your objectives? Acclimation and handling. You're trying to get those animals so they're quiet and they understand people, they understand what you're trying to achieve, and they don't have the fear response, which in turn increase the immunity to respiratory disease and socialisation, educate and experience confinement and outside stresses. Like, just think about an animal when you first wean it, what it goes through. If you don't yard wean it, and just put it straight on a truck and go to the sale yards, think of the stresses that are involved in that. It's massive. They usually, in unweaned situation, they'll leave the farm, they'll be separated from the cow, they'll be put on a truck, sent to the yards in the afternoon, sold the next day. They'll be sitting around yards and bellowing and carrying on. They'll get picked up again, maybe that day, maybe the next day. They'll then go to truck to wherever they're going. Then they get chucked in a paddock, and it all just keeps going on. And you wonder why that animal doesn't perform very well. So yard weaning, very simple. I try to keep it simple. Provide an escape-proof yard, that's always a good start. Stocking density is about 4 metres squared per head for a 250 to 260 weaner. So what you're trying to do is confine them for about 3 days. That's what you're trying to do, to get that socialisation and the stresses going and the immune responses happening. Provide water, trough equivalent 2 centimetres a head. Funnily enough, I don't know whether you've experienced this, I hope you haven't. I've walked into people that are yard weaning and they don't actually have water in the yards. So I don't understand what they think the calves are going to do. Provide feed bunk or feeder space. It's important to get the animal to actually have the ability to get an imprint on how to eat out of a bunk. Irrespective whether you're going into a feedlot industry or you're going in background, it's important to both understand water, troughing and bunk feeding. If they come to our farm, every paddock's got a trough in it, so they have to be able to drink out of the trough for a start. Secondly, they get fed supplements in their life, so they'll need to be able to go to another bunker. Yard should be clean so there's not excess of dust. If dusty, sprinkle a little water to settle the dust. Dust isn't very good for respiratory or eyes. In extremely muddy conditions, the opposite. Perhaps apply wood chips, over yard or similar bedding, corn stalks or stubble. Just remember, there's not a very good environment if it's wet or dry. Provide good quality grass. You loosen in hay, a hay feeder or ad lib. And then you obviously can use a whole heap of treatments here. We use generated label rates, which is an electrolyte. Provide feed in feed bunk or feeder. This can be loosened hay, silage, or you can use pellets, whatever tickles your fancy as long as you're doing it properly. And step up based on body weight. Water, clean trough daily. Monitor water intakes. Water consumption should be about 10% of the body weight. So I've put together a process because I've had to do this because we guarantee that we're going to have yard wean cattle from 3 years ago to the industry. So this is straight for my people. But I'm happy to give this out to whoever wants it. It's actually on your website, so it's there to be used. It's very simple. Haven't seen too many disasters with it. So it's a day by day thing. So what's the difference? Obviously, weaned cattle, stronger immune system, ability to travel, temperament, less mortality, less morbidity, high performance on grass and feedlot. Obviously, unweaned, increased risk of BRD, higher stress, reducing safe travel. As I said, if we have unweaned cattle in Victoria and South Australia or northern Queensland, we can't buy them because they're too many die. Your temperament's variable, high mortality, high morbidity, lower performance on grass and feedlot. This is the trial that Tony alluded to. This is an old trial. It was done in, I think, about 2000 or something like that. It's not a very recent trial, and the weight gains aren't terrific. It was under a university-run program that was fine for showing the differentials. So paddock, this is effective weaning on feedlot performance. So these were in feedlot for 78 days. So they had were preconditioned prior to feedlot entry, and this is there were 3 treatments: paddock weaned, yard weaned, and yard trained. Paddock weaned was they were basically let out in the paddock and fend for themselves. Yard weaned as per a basic confinement, and yard trained, full confinement, just going through the yards a bit. So there's 3 different sets of systems. So there was a good difference in. Sorry, I'll go back. There was a good difference. There was a reasonable difference in their performance in the feedlot for a start. That was the first thing that showed. Secondly, the sickness. This is what Tony was talking about. 18% of those cattle were pulled for sickness. In these ones here, there was 3%, which is pretty high. Our feedlot runs at about sub-1s now for that. So that's a formulated trial. That was a proper trial done, and that's repeatable every day in our feedlot. If we do that, that's exactly what the sort of results we get. We actually get worse results in there, up here. So preconditioning is obviously yard weaning, vaccination programs, internal and external parasites, commingling, weight ranging, acclimation, nutrition, and feedlot induction. They're the 8 key points that we concentrate on. So the vaccination programs, it's a pretty simple one. Your clostridial vaccinations with a 4 to 6 week booster, that's critical, that bit. And I think we were talking last night to a few people about if they're going under lucerne, they'll continue whichever program you're using. They'll in the peak of the lucerne, we'll be vaccinating them every about 6 to 8 weeks, and to reduce bloat, which is clostridial is a predisposing problem. BRD, you can use Bovillus MH or Bovillus MH plus IBR. It depends on what you're supplying and who you're supplying. You've got to understand who you're supplying to which product you use. Again, it's a 4 to 6 week program, so that coincides with that. So how we run our operation, they get inducted. About 5 weeks later, they come back in. They run into what we call a booster system. They come back and get treated for that. Then they're finished. They're all done, put to bed. Internal, external parasites, don't underestimate them. Obviously in our environment we have a fluke problem, and most of our cattle coming in have been exposed to fluke in certain areas, particularly Victoria and down this end of the world. So we treat them with ML and a flukicide. What we do ongoing, we determine by fecal egg counts. We just don't drench. We monitor whether we need to drench. And that's we've done 2 years of this now, and it's really starting to pay back for us. Feedlot entry, again, fecal egg count and culture to find out what worms you've got. I don't know how you tell when you look at an animal what worms they've got in them, or better still, whether they're actually worming. You assume they're worming, you assume they've got fluke or homunculus, and you actually do the cultures and they come back quite different to that. So it puts you in a little bit of control. It's a new, this is that 5% change that we're not good at, that we should be looking at it. I think Pfizer, whatever their name is now, are coming out with this program. I can't remember what the name of it is. And obviously any external parasites need to be treated as required. Co-mingling, we run our cattle a minimum of 40 days co-mingle, which is putting the cattle together as a group, weight ranged to about 40 to 50 kilos, and they're treated for that period prior to the feedlot entry. Acclimation. Obviously acclimation is handling of cattle and how to determine or expose all these types of stresses to the animals. It helps a lot when they get off the truck and go into a feedlot. So all our cattle are exposed to all of these things. Nutrition, we concentrate on backgrounding nutrition. I believe strongly in weight gain every day, not in compensatory gain. If we're taking in weaners that have come off good well-weaned cattle, we bring them in, we expect weight gain from day one. In our booster area, which is the first 4 to 5 weeks, we average anywhere from about 0.2 to 0.5 kilos a day. In obviously outside that, as I said, we're aiming for 1.2 kilos. If we don't do that properly, those cattle coming in the old system, unweaned cattle, getting chucked in the paddock, first 30 days we'd lose probably 20 kilos. That's normally what happened. Now they come out in the first 4 weeks in the first 30 days with about 15 to 20 kilos. So that's what we aim to do. So minimise nutritional stress with management and supplementation, high quality water, don't underestimate the value of water, determined by market specifications. Feedlot induction, all our inductions, as I said, are done on farm. They go directly as a pen lot from our farm directly into the feedlot pen. They don't get touched other than they get scanned into the feedlot. That's all they do. Transport is planned around feeding times. Obviously, if you've got a 11 to 3 feeding, the cattle have got to arrive before that. There's no point in arriving there after 3 o'clock because the feeding's gone and you've just wasted the last 40 days getting it sorted out. So timing is critical. And the transport is planned to deliver pen lots. So if we're delivering a pen of 240, we don't have a truck going all day backwards and forwards to get the 240 there because they've got to eat and they've got to be going straight in the pen. These are all the planning things that you've got to put in the process. So putting it all together, key outcomes, obviously health is improved, deaths are reduced, performance is increased, feed efficiency is increased, and you're hitting your market specs all the time, which is to make money. If you're not hitting market specs, you're not in the game in the margins we're working with. One of the domestic markets, you go overweight by 0.5 of a kilo, it's about 80%. 80 cents a kilo, 80 cents a kilo discount, which in a 320 kilo animals is about $200. We've done a few of those. It's not a lot of fun. Just a bit of data that this actually comes from Tony's benchmark. This is that benchmarking group we're talking about. BRD Gunny's the red. In the old days, Gunny was up here. It was the leader up here. And now it's coming, this is old data, this is 2012. We're actually down with either top 1 or 2 feedlots now in health. In BRD, that's 100-day cattle. That's domestic cattle, 70-day cattle, which is about 40% of our cattle. So you can see we're leaders in that area. BRD death loss, we're one of the lowest yards in BRD death loss. Interesting thing with what we've done with our backgrounding is intake. Our intake is the highest intake of all those feedlots by about 1 kilo a day. Consequently, it's not just they eat a lot, they're actually the highest performers too. So we're preconditioning those animals for the feedlot, specifically for the feedlot, and that's what you can do. That's significant dollars involved in that. Death loss, that's just over a period of time. You can see it's there, and our death loss is below that line now, but then those trend lines there now. So that's they're the previous years. That's what This is Gunny, what it used to be like. You can see how high the death losses were. And we've pulled that line further down. And it's due to, obviously, our background in preconditioning. In this, I believe there wouldn't have been too many Herefords in these jobs here in their previous years. Morton K didn't buy a lot of Herefords. So that would be a lot of Boss Indicus cattle. Now we've got, our feedlots would be probably running at about anywhere from 15 to 20% Hereford. So that's what I'm saying. If you background things properly and you do things right, those animals are quite suitable for the job. But that'll come a lot to you as a group. You've got to help yourselves to do that. And you can do your basics. If you can do your basics, you've got a good chance of getting there.